Our first set of flipped classroom notes are going to be on rock classification. So as we move through the PowerPoint, what you'll need to do is to write down the information on your closed notes and fill in any words that aren't there. All right, we're going to be talking about how rocks are classified. How can you figure out what kind of rock you have in your hand? So we're going to first look at some very basic information about how all rocks are classified. Well, you may already know that rocks are divided into three main classes. You studied those in elementary school. But did you know that they're based on how they form? So we're going to look at the three types of rocks, the first one being igneous, the second one is sedimentary, and the third one is metamorphic. So those may be some common terms for you. You may already know about those three different types of rocks. Now each type of rock can be further classified. So that's a big difference. What we're going to do this year is we're going to be looking at what are the different types of igneous rocks or sedimentary rocks or metamorphic rocks, and how we figure out if the rock fits into each of those categories. And so what we're going to be looking at now is what that further classification is based on. And that's going to be on composition and texture. So first, let's talk about composition. Composition is basically what something is made of. It's chemical makeup. What actually goes in to making up those different types of rocks. So for rocks, we have two basic categories of the composition of the rock, and it's either mineral or other materials. And some of the other materials that rocks are made of are shells, clay, plants, sand, and pebbles. Now sometimes when you pick a rock up, it's easy to see these different parts or materials that make up a rock. And other times they're so small that they're really microscopic. And some of these pieces are just by nature smaller or larger than others. And that's all going to play a part in how we classify rocks. So first let's talk about texture. Now you're probably used to the word texture meaning how something feels. With rocks, it's just a little bit different. It has more to do with the composition of the rock and the grains of the rock. So texture is determined by the grains, size, shape, and position. First, let's talk about what a grain is. A grain is the individual piece that makes up the rock. In the previous slide, we looked at how shells and clay and sand or other pebbles or minerals can make up a rock. Well, these actually are what the grains of the rock are. So the grains are the individual pieces that make up a rock. Well, they can have all different sizes. Clay is much, much, much smaller than a pebble or even a piece of sand. So they have different sizes. They have different shapes. Rocks come in all different shapes, little pebbles, pieces of sand. Minerals come in different shapes. And then their position, how they line up. Sometimes they line up in layers or swirls. There's some kind of pattern that's created, or they line up so the rock is flat. So position is also going to be very important when we start classifying rocks. Now, these are the terms that we use for classification and how we describe the grains. Igneous can be fine or coarse grain rock. Sedimentary can have fine, medium, or coarse grains in it. And metamorphic can be fine or coarse grain. So fine would mean that it's small. Sometimes it's small and you can see it. Sometimes it's so small you can't see it. You would need a microscope to see the individual grains of the rock. Coarse grain, those are big. Usually you're going to be able to see the grains in any coursed grain rock. Now, texture can also reveal the process that forms the rock. So the process is, what happened to create that rock the way you see it. Well, that's the end of our notes for this evening, and you will need to bring these notes completed with you to class tomorrow, and we'll continue on with an activity where we'll be looking at these characteristics of the rocks. Have a good night.